There are a lot of weird stories in the Muslim sources, stories that make you wonder, why in the name of common sense would anyone ever write down something like this? But I challenge you to find a weirder, creepier, more disturbing story than the tale of Muhammad's late-night desert rendezvous with the men of Al-Zut. Since Raymond Ibrahim has already done the research on Muhammad's romantic encounter, we'll let Raymond break down the details.
This odd hadith, which I'm about to narrate, appears in several hadith collections, including the highly esteemed Musnad of Ibn Hanbal, founder of one of Islam's 4 schools of laws, or madhahib, as well as in many other well-respected Islamic texts, all of which are being taught in Al-Azhar.
So, the scholars know about this. But like so many other issues the scholars hide from us, this story hasn't worked its way to the general population. Until now.
The hadith, which is narrated by Abdullah bin Mas'ud, a companion of the Prophet and one of Islam's most reliable and trustworthy transmitters of hadith, goes as follows. Brace yourself. Abdullah begins by telling us that Muhammad called on him to accompany him on a trip into the desert. When they reached a certain place and night had fallen, Muhammad made a line in the sand, most likely a circle, and told Abdullah, quote, "Stay behind this line and do not cross it, for if you do, you will die."
Muhammad drew a line in the sand and warned his companion, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, not to cross it. Let's call this line the Diddy line, as in, Muhammad didn't just cross that line, did he? We could also call it the Cuck line for reasons that will soon be clear.
Muhammad then left his startled companion and walked into the desert night, about the distance of a hurled stone, says Abdullah. Before long, our narrator saw a group of men, he does not specify how many, who, quote, appeared to be al-Zut. He describes them as, quote, tall, lean, and naked.
So, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was behind the Diddy line, the Cuck line, but Muhammad crossed the Diddy line, and he was soon surrounded by a number of tall, lean, naked men, the men of Al-Zut.
Other Islamic sources say these Zut were a black-skinned people, and we'll get into that later. After describing them, Abdullah goes on, and here's the problematic part, to say, quote, they went to and began to ride the Prophet of Allah.
They did what now?
They went to and began to ride the Prophet of Allah. Literally, that's what the Arabic says. These tall, black, naked men rode Muhammad. The Arabic word yarkabun, which I will presently discuss, can also be translated as mounted. And they did this all night long, says Abdullah.
These tall, lean, black, naked men mounted Muhammad in the desert and rode him all night long, while his companion Abdullah ibn Mas'ud watched from behind the Cuck line?
During which time they would also come and circle around and try to reach him, but they were prevented, apparently from the line of protection Muhammad had drawn in the sand for his companion. Abdullah concludes his narration, quote, I was extremely terrified by them, so I sat down. With the coming of dawn, they began to depart. Then the Prophet of Allah returned, slowly and in pain from that which they did while riding him.
These tall, lean, black, naked men tried to get to Ibn Mas'ud, but he was protected by the Diddy line. He was terrified, so he sat down. When dawn arrived, the tall, lean, black, naked men left, and Muhammad came stumbling back to Ibn Mas'ud, slowly, because he was in pain from these tall, lean, black, naked men riding him all night long.
According to another narration found in several Islamic texts, including Akhbar Mecca by Al-Fakahi, Muhammad complained to Abdullah that, quote, they wounded me all night long, at which point the Prophet proceeds to lay his head and fall asleep in Abdullah's lap.
Poor Muhammad was all tuckered out from these tall, lean, black, naked men riding him all night long, and he fell asleep with his head resting on Ibn Mas'ud's lap. Yes, Muhammad liked resting his head on men's laps to fall asleep. Just ask Dihya al-Kalbi. But who were these guys who mounted him and rode him all night long? Turns out, when they're described as black, it doesn't mean African.
Who are these al-Zut, these naked men who rode Muhammad all night long? According to Islam's written records, they were a migrant people from India or modern-day Pakistan, described in the sources as very tall, very dark-skinned, very lean, strong and hardy, and often used for labor-intensive work.
Sounds like Muhammad was using them for some labor-intensive work. So, Al-Zut referred to people from India or Pakistan. Do we know anything else about these guys?
In early Arabic ethnographies and literary works, Al-Zut are also depicted as being very sexual and virile, with very large penises. In fact, according to one Arabic source, Al-Tashibbahat by Ibn Abi Awan, quote, "The penis of Al-Zut never weakens," meaning their large phalluses never go limp and are ever ready.
The men of Al-Zut were known for being extremely horny at all times, and Muhammad wanted to meet with these men at night in the desert, and they mounted him and rode him all night long while Ibn Masud watched from behind the Diddy line? Raymond asked ChatGPT about the men of Al-Zut.
I then asked ChatGPT to give me a physical description of Al-Zut based on early Arabic sources, and it said, quote, "In literary and anecdotal texts, they are grouped together with other southern or dark-skinned people, all of whom have the following traits: sexual potency, prominent genitalia, and associations with physical strength and virility."
Why did Muhammad want to meet these guys at night in the desert? And what do the sources mean when they say these guys were riding him all night long?
Now let's talk about the Arabic word translated as ride, as in Al-Zut rode the Prophet. Not only does it have the same exact meaning in English, as in to ride a horse, for example, but it carries the same slang meaning, as in copulating with a woman. In fact, several Islamic sources use it literally to mean sex.
So, when it says they rode him all night long, the word rode can either mean they rode him like a horse, or it can mean they had sex with him. What do you think it means in this context?
It's also interesting to note that when Al-Zut begins circling and trying to reach our terrified narrator, Abdullah, his first instinct was to sit down. Was he trying to hide and protect that one part of his body, which these naked men were apparently trying to access? That is, his bottom, by sitting down?
Well, he saw what they were doing to poor Muhammad's junk in the trunk, so we can't blame him for sitting down and protecting his badonkadonk from the booty bandits of Al-Zut. All right, now that we know the details, Raymond puts it all together.
Muhammad took his close companion, Abdullah, into the desert at night. He warned him to wait behind a line and went off at a distance, apparently for a pre-planned rendezvous. Before long, Abdullah saw several naked men from the people of Al-Zut appear, described in the sources as tall, lean, virile, and with large penises.
Why was Muhammad meeting these guys at night in the desert after crossing the Diddy line?
These men then took turns riding or mounting the Prophet all night long. They also tried to reach him, but Abdullah immediately sat down, apparently to protect that one part of his body they were trying to access.
Ibn Masud apparently did a better job protecting his bubble pop than Muhammad did.
As the sun rose, these naked men began to depart, even as Muhammad returned in pain, limping towards Abdullah and saying how Al-Zut had injured him. He then lays in his companion's lap and falls asleep.
Nothing suspicious here. So, this is what I would consider the weirdest, creepiest, most disturbing story in the Muslim sources, and that's saying a lot. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something. Let me ask all our Muslim friends what this means. Why did Muhammad head out into the desert in the middle of the night to meet with a bunch of Indian or Pakistani men who were known for their strong sexual appetites? Why did he bring his companion, Abdullah ibn Masud, and make him stand behind the Diddy line? Did Muhammad like it when one of his companions watched? What do your sources mean when they say that these tall, lean, black, naked men mounted Muhammad and rode him all night long? When the men of Al-Zut approached the Diddy line, or the Cuck line, why did Ibn Masud sit down to protect the Jiggle twins, his wiggle bags, his rump rockets? And why did Muhammad return to Ibn Masud in pain, totally worn out?